Well, welcome to another episode of In Conversation with Benedict Rogers, a series produced by Hong Kong Watch, broadcast on YouTube, where we talk to different guests about the situation in Hong Kong and the international response to Hong Kong. And I am Benedict Rogers, the co-founder and chair of Hong Kong Watch. And I'm really delighted and very privileged that we're joined today by my friend Nathan Law, who really needs no introduction. Nathan was elected as the youngest member of the Legislative Council in Hong Kong, then was disqualified for quoting Mahatma Gandhi when you took your oath, and then imprisoned because of his role in the umbrella movement. And of course, earlier this month, became the highest profile activist to leave Hong Kong just after the national security law was imposed. So Nathan, welcome and thank you so much. You've been doing so many media interviews. We're very grateful that you're sparing some time to talk to us today.
No, thanks for the invitation, Ben.
Thank you. Nathan, you and I first met in 2016 when you were a newly elected legislator. And since then, you've had all the experiences that I just described in my introduction to you. And of course, today we're talking on the day when at least 12 pro-democracy candidates, including some sitting legislators, have been disqualified for the next Legico elections. Having gone through the disqualification yourself and then having gone through everything that you've experienced in the last few years, can you say just what are you feeling today about the situation in Hong Kong?
Yeah, the situation in Hong Kong is outrageous because we had expected that there will be disqualification, but we didn't really see that benchmark to be so low that a lot of mild Democrats are also being disqualified. And the threshold would be if you oppose the national security law, a policy enacted by the central government, you are not in allegiance to the basic law, so that you're not solemn to it and you're disqualified. That is such an absurd benchmark. And I think most of the pro-democracy candidates would fall into that area. So it's basically also closing down the door of the Legico to the proper, pro-democracy candidates.
Absolutely. The international community has already responded to recent developments in various ways. The BNO offer, the suspension of the extradition agreements by a number of countries, including the UK. What do you think the UK and others in the international community should do to respond to this latest development?
Well, of course, we need counteraction towards it because if they make a move and we don't respond it, then it won't be an effective response. So I think while the UK, they're offering safeguard plans to Hong Kong people and also tackling the industry on the ground like Huawei and the stuff like that. And the next step will be the preferential treatment of Hong Kong, and also dealing with the companies in the UK having financial scrutiny and things like that. I think we need to have prompt and swift action in place in order to send a signal that there will be deterrence if Beijing continuously commit into human rights violation in Hong Kong.
Thank you. Let's just take a step back and look at your own decision to leave Hong Kong. You came to the UK a few weeks ago with, as you told me when we first met, just a backpack and a carry-on suitcase. You were actually the first person besides my own family that I met after our own lockdown in the UK. It was a privilege to see you not long after you arrived here. But since then, you've met the US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, the last governor of Hong Kong, Chris Patten, the shadow Foreign Secretary, Lisa Nandy, the former Conservative Party leader, Ian Duncan Smith, and many, many others, and you've been all over the media. What is your mission and your sense of your own future insofar as you know at this early stage, and also the future for Hong Kong?
Yeah, I think I carry a huge responsibility with me when I left Hong Kong because, well, under the national security law, it is so difficult for us to really continue the progressive international advocacy work on the ground in Hong Kong. So it relies on people overseas to really speak up Hong Kong people's mind and their demands. So for me, that kind of responsibility, I see it as my duty, even though I'm not in Hong Kong, but I will continue to fight for Hong Kong in a position that I found myself suitable. So yeah, indeed, all these meetings and media interview, that I see it as my responsibility and my duty to do it, and I will continue to voice the demands and the truth of Hong Kong when they couldn't do it on the ground.
You met Secretary Pompeo, the highest political figure, highest level political figure that you've met so far. What was your message to him? And would you agree that this is not only a US-China issue, but that it's actually really important that the European Union, the UK, and indeed countries in the Asian region, if possible, should also be speaking out and taking action so that it becomes an internationalized issue?
Well, definitely. Due to meeting protocol, I cannot reveal what he said, but I think that meeting was constructive and positive. I share a lot of insights about the sentiment on the ground in Hong Kong, and also I think we need a multilateral approach towards the authoritarian expansion of China, that we need to incorporate more and more democracies in order to defend our shared democratic values. So I mean, the UK, Europe, or Asian democracies like Japan, Korea, or even India, these are our allies, and we need to work with them in order to form a cohesive, united front lines in order to contain Chinese expansion. So I think that is the trend now. So we could listen to the speech Secretary Pompeo gave a couple of days ago, and he also commented on well, having an international front itself, quite a bilateral well, warfare between China and the US. And I think UK has been responding quite swiftly, and we need more and more cooperation like that. I think actually the world is moving towards a more unified direction with all these democracies, and we need to make it work to contain Chinese authoritarian expansion.
Absolutely. We've had the disqualifications today, but just in the last few days, there were a lot of rumors that that Carrie Lam might announce the postponement of the Legico elections using the COVID-19 pandemic as the excuse. Do you think that it's likely that will still happen now that they've disqualified candidates, or do you think they will now go ahead with the elections? And if they do postpone on top of disqualifying, what then should the world do to respond?
I think both could happen because the government is actually having, well, in terms of the following strategy, they could play both cards, and these could also benefit them. So it is hard to predict whether the government would postpone it, given that they've already disqualified so many candidates. And but the only thing that we know is even though it is not postponed, then it will definitely be a very corrupted election that is definitely not fair and free, and the world should recognize it. It is no longer like a council that at least there are some democracy inside. Well, it's just a complete authoritarian council. It's just like an extension of CCP's assembly.
Absolutely. We saw the way the National People's Congress just rolled out the national security law, and it's a terrible thought that we may see something similar to the National People's Congress functioning in Hong Kong going forward. Can I ask you? You've spoken a bit about your own role outside Hong Kong, but what role do you think the increasingly large Hong Kong diaspora around the world Hong Kongers either who've been outside Hong Kong for some time, or, as is likely, more and more people leaving the city to live in other parts of the world. What role do you think Hong Kongers outside Hong Kong have in shaping the international debate and influencing international policy towards China?
Well, of course, if we're outside, first and foremost, we cannot saying that if we left Hong Kong, then we have nothing to do. It is absolutely wrong. As long as we have the hearts and minds with Hong Kong, with the Hong Kong people, then there will be a lot of things that we could contribute, and it's financially or like vocally speaking, the things that they cannot speak on the ground, and also getting into all the professionals in the other countries, pushing forward subtle changes. I think these are the ways that we could really work to make the brand and the culture of Hong Kong not faded. One of the mission of the Chinese Communist Party is to have like wash out Hong Kong's identity and our culture. So if we could preserve it, even though we're outside Hong Kong, we have much more freedom to do so. I think it is also one of the great strategies to counter Beijing's threats and the infiltration. So I think we have to get our mentality straight that actually if we have left Hong Kong, then we still have room to play in the grand battle.
Absolutely. I often have been saying to people recently, it's not that Hong Kong is dead, it's that one country, two systems and Hong Kong's freedoms are dead, but Hong Kong itself lives on in the hearts and minds of Hong Kongers wherever they are.
Yeah, definitely. As I said, I think Hong Kong, well, it can be a physical location, but it can also be a spirit, be a cultural symbol. As long as we embrace it, then it could live. So I think it's important that we continue to fight for Hong Kong.
Yeah, absolutely. And for ordinary members of the public in free democratic societies, the UK, the US, other places, who may be watching developments in Hong Kong, maybe they've been following it for some time, maybe they're just only now becoming up to speed on it. But for those who want to help, what advice and suggestions would you give them, ordinary people in free societies?
Well, take the UK as an example. We could really observe the shift of China's attitude and the China policy from a bottom-up level. That we've got more and more MPs like saying that we need to be tough to China, we need to hold them accountable, we need to be assertive, and they reshaped the whole narrative of the country towards China and also the policy from the government. So I think like every one of you could help as long as you vow your concern to Hong Kong to your local leader of the constituency and speaking up the issue on the internet. I think that these are really helpful in terms of shaping the mentality of your local MP and then influence back to the grand political atmosphere. So I think, yeah, each one of you have a role to play.
Absolutely. Can I ask just your reflections on both your own security and the security of other Hong Kongers, and indeed others of us who speak up for Hong Kong, given the extraterritorial application of Article 38 of the National Security Law. Of course, many countries, or a growing number of countries, have suspended their extradition agreements, which is a very welcome step. But what concerns do you have about your own security, the security of Hong Kongers around the world, and of friends of Hong Kong around the world?
Well, we all understand how far-reaching China could reach. So it's important that we remain safe. Don't fantasize that we are not being threatened after we left Hong Kong. So for me, I've been adopting some safety measures. And when I feel threatened, I'll definitely report to the local authority to really look into it. So Yeah, indeed, we have to be very careful. But I don't think we should be, or well, on the other hand, I don't think we should limit our actions because of fear. A lot of Hong Kongese, even though they are overseas, they are afraid of the retaliation from Beijing, so that they dare not to like speak up their minds and to really contribute to the movement. But I think that is also another ways of being influenced by white terror. Like you have to be well prepared, and you need to take safety precaution, but you also need to speak up for yourself and your fellows. So for me, I would rather take a little bit of risk, but also stay very active and very careful in order to fulfill my duty and to be responsible to the movement. So I think that is how I deal with it, and I hope that Hong Kongers overseas could overcome that white terror and politics of fear and continue to voice for yourself and for Hong Kong people.
I think that's exactly right. It's clear from my own very limited experience, and I mean, what I've experienced is nothing compared to what Hong Kongers face. But you know, I've had some threatening letters and emails, but I don't feel afraid by that. And in fact, if anything, it makes me more determined to keep speaking out, because it's clear the intention behind it is not necessarily actually to do anything to me. The intention behind it is to create fear, and we mustn't give in to that. So I agree totally. I just have two more questions, Nathan, before we close. My penultimate question. Hong Kong Watch was launched in 2017. Before that, there was no organization in the UK, or I think very few, if any, anywhere else. And in the last 3 years, Hong Kong Watch has been very busy in trying to be a voice for Hong Kong. We hosted you together with Martin Lee and Benny Tai in 2018. And we've hosted a number of others as well. Given now the dangers that people in Hong Kong face in terms of international advocacy, how important do you think it is that there is an organization like Hong Kong Watch and other organizations in other parts of the world?
Well, I think it's utterly important because, like for me myself, I fled to UK, and of course I am a prominent activist in Hong Kong, and I am recognized by the international media and international community. But I also need someone who have been working in the political scene in the UK for long, knowing all the connections and having the resources to reach out in order to maximize the impact that the Hong Kong movement want to bring and want to localize that. So I think Hong Kong Watch play an immense and incredible duty in that aspect to maximize each individual's voice and making it work in UK politics. So I think it is very important that we've got these organizations to kind of like connect us to the fabrics of local politics. And we've got HADC in the US, we've got Hong Kong Watch, and I'm expecting more and more these organizations coming up, and that could maximize our impact.
My last question then, you made the very difficult decision, as we talked about earlier, to leave Hong Kong and to continue the struggle abroad. And yet it must be very difficult, given the scope of the national security law, for you to stay in contact with your fellow activists on the ground in Hong Kong. But if they were able to hear this message, what would your message be for people in Hong Kong if they're taking the risk to watch this? What would you want to say to them?
Well, I think we all have our duty. We all have our responsibility, and that kind of expectation of how much we could bear for ourselves. So if you think the situation is too dangerous or you cannot bear so much, then I don't think you should be guilty for yourself. I think everyone have their role, and when the time comes, they will contribute them at the right position. So for me, it's important that we realize that each of us carry a little bit of Hong Kong, and we will contribute in accordance to our ability and our determination. So I hope that at least every one of us will not give up and to continue to fight for Hong Kong no matter what.
That's a really wonderful message to end with in these extremely difficult times. And once again, I'm aware that how much major media you've been doing. You were just on the BBC before talking with me. You've been doing lots of other media. So we're really grateful to you for making time to talk with us in this very small program.
Pleasure is mine.
And I just say to you and to Hong Kongers who are watching this that I recently learnt a new phrase, which is hand-foot. And I hope that I and my colleagues in Hong Kong Watch can be regarded as hand-foots alongside everybody else in this fight. So, Nathan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.